Hey y'all, it's Erin of SURJ again. And this week we are talking rot. And no, not the rot from your roof or last week's vegetables in the refrigerator still maybe. No, I'm talking about the US Constitution, our democracy, as sad and problematic as it can be. So over the last couple weeks, I'm sure you've seen a real step up in sustained and really vicious attacks on civil liberties, due process, with the Trump administration repeatedly lashing out against people who are standing up across the country in righteous protest. There was a great article in the Times last week by Jamal Bowie who explained that actually this isn't a new phenomenon. This isn't out of the blue, but this is really part of a decades-long crisis built on constitutional rot. So if you're on the SURJ page, you probably already know that the US constitutional system has had problems since the very beginning. From, enshrining slavery to the way in which it continues to uphold racial capitalism and white supremacy in many, many ways. And at the same time, that system has also played a really important role in preserving some of the victories that social movements have wrestled out of the systems over years and years and years, from abolition to civil rights movement to the labor movement. And so, Bowie points out that the system has been rotting for some time now, and that in the last 20 years, the power of the presidency over Congress and the court systems has expanded in really, really unhealthy ways. So let me break a little bit more of this down, what he says. The long deterioration, as I said, has been amped up, and it's taken to a much more radical conclusion over these last 2 months since Trump's taken office again. So those behind Project 2025, who clearly support Trump, are big believers in something called executive action theory, which is really just a fancy way to say this is a radically empowered presidency that runs roughshots over the checks and balances that we all learned in a high school civics class, right? That are supposedly at the core of US democracy. So plainly put, the president can do whatever they want, whatever they want, with no checks from courts, Congress, or the people. And this is no longer just like a hypothetical or a thought experiment as it was for many of these folks for a very long time. It's a theory that's being lived out in practice right now, and it's being put to the test. So in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we saw Trump walk right up to the edge of defying federal courts, and then also went beyond that when he started bullying and harassing federal judges who were pushing back on him and asking questions, especially in the case of the recent Venezuelan plane deportation, where they ignored the rule of the federal judge, right? And for that, he did draw a rebuke, a very polite rebuke from a conservative Scottish judge. But clearly, the administration is planning to continue to push past this, right? Okay, so this isn't just happening as a thought experiment, it's in service of a much larger push. Drawing on racist xenophobia that sees immigrants as criminal if they're from Latin America or terrorists if they're from the Middle East, Trump is actively violating the Constitution in his deportation efforts. He's also drawing on racist ideas of what students of color, students with disabilities, and low-income students deserve. And Trump's attempt to destroy the Department of Education threatens to harm the most vulnerable students in this country. These attacks both undermine our governing system and perpetuate white nationalist ideas. I want to swing back to Bowie's article. He says that we are actually at a tipping point, and very, very close to a bona fide constitutional crisis. He points out that, Trump and his supporters aren't like the originalist defenders of the Constitution that they and many mainline conservatives have claimed for years, but they're actually trying to dismantle the limited protections we've won and the system that has protected that. So they are fundamentally anti-constitutionalists. So he points to three things. One is the president's one-sided attempts to break up the Department of Education with a stroke of a pen. Federal departments are established by law and cannot be dismantled without congressional approval. The second thing is Trump's claim that he can deport non-citizens without any kind of hearing or any kind of process that they are legally allowed to use in their defense. And the right to a fair trial is a key part of the US legal system. And three, the president threatening to put US citizens who have vandalized Teslas in protests on removal flights to El Salvador is about as straight up violation of legal rights as citizens as you can get. It basically claims that the president has complete power over the lives of all citizens and can, on a whim, strip away your rights. So at SURJ, we think Bowie's right and that the constitutional crisis has arrived. Trump's moves are right out of the authoritarian playbook, and they rely on white people's ongoing consent and participation. And so at SURJ, as you know, we're working to bring more white people into our organizing, to turn people out to protests, to encourage resistance everywhere that Trump is taking his authoritarian takeover, and doing our part to build the multiracial resistance. It's more important now than ever. So it's grim out there, but here's the punchline. You should not be alone and you don't need to sit around and wait. You are very much not alone. There was actually a Reuters poll that was released yesterday that said that 82% of people said the president of the United States should obey federal court rulings, even if the president doesn't want to. And, across the country, we are seeing resistance and fight back bubbling up strong in the many, many of thousands and really everywhere. Immigrant rights supporters have been showing up in big numbers on the West Coast and big cities. More than 70,000 people have showed up for the Fighting Oligarchy mass rallies that Bernie Sanders and AOC have organized in Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. And SURJ has been busy training too. We've got more than 1,000 people who are organizing in their local communities through the Protect and Resist pledge, getting local electeds to say that they will not go along with what Trump is up to. And we are also thrilled to be organizing with major unions and community partners across the country towards a massive day of action on May 1st. So, the grassroots organizing effort continues, and we're building power in places where we're really contending with MAGA for our people. So we're on the right track. We have to continue and sign up with SURJ to get connected to those May Day actions or to be connected with other people in your community taking action.